the lesson from the experience last September should be that any future government has to put financial stability first, has to make sure that it matches ambition with responsibility, and that's what will characterise our approach.
Fairness at all? Is fairness not going to come into it? Right, support for the most vulnerable, redistribution? Are these words that are just like anathema to Labour Party politics right now? Or are we just literally just looking at ambitious middle class people and economic security for the well-off? Is that all you care about now?
I just wonder the responsibility argument, the financial stability, if that comes into the debate that is going on around this £28 billion a year that Labour wants to spend on green energy. Now, there's been lots of talk this week about Labour rowing back from the plan. But as far as I can tell, you're not really rowing back from it, are you? You're saying that you are going to end up spending £28 billion a year on green.
Yeah, last time someone said, you know, we'll be the strong and stable government. How well did that turn up, right? And again, it's exactly what I was saying when we were covering a cross question the other day, the segment I uploaded about Rachel Sharby. But economic caution is not going to solve the issues of this country. We need radical and transformative politics, radical and transformative economic policy to try and dig this country out of the neoliberalism-shaped hole that it's dug itself into. And it's not going to be easy, but it's going to involve capital investment from the government using the advantage of budget deficits as any kind of basic Keynesian would to try and stimulate economic growth with a proper industrial strategy, which is what the one thing that was good about the Labour Party policy that had been announced so far. The one thing that was good was this Green Prosperity Plan, which of course caveats involved. Lots of it will be private sector subsidy, lots of it will be kind of nonsense private-public partnerships. A lot of the dividends from this will be paid out to the kind of people who are going to donate to the Labour Party. Whether it's going to be done in the interest of the people is entirely up in the air really at this point. Whether that money would have been, they would have got some economic growth, but where would those gains have gone? We can only but speculate. But it was necessary at the very least to ensure that there was some level of economic growth coming into this country to try and fix this broken economy where there's lopsided and broken economy. And the fact that Labour are now rowing back on the single good pledge that they have had and they've not broken, again, it just shows that all of the words that these people say are completely meaningless, right? They pledged £28 billion. And now they're rowing back on yet another pledge. Just like every other single pledge all these people have stood on, because politics is meaning to these people. And the Liberals will enable them by saying, well, they're forced to because the economy has said no, as if that's just the answer to every question. Oh, economy says no. Economy says no. When that's not how a Keynesian would look at the current state of the economy, right? It's ironic how that everyone thought it was absolutely fine to engage in deficit spending on the energy price guarantee, which did not influence supply at all. Didn't influence supply at all. It was just there to subsidise demand. That was fine, right? No one batted an eyelid over the fact that Liz Truss decided specifically to use deficit spending on demand-side policies to be able to make sure that gas was cheaper on the consumer end, which, could have been done with windfall taxes, but, it's better than leaving it up to just the markets. But regardless, the fact that there was no qualms of any of this, yet suddenly Labour were planning to do the same thing theoretically on supply-side investment on a greater supply of renewable energy in the country to give us energy security and lots of green jobs. That's the thing that now gets cut and also gets scrutiny. This complete one good policy has now been ruined by a Labour Party who, quite frankly, couldn't care less about whether or not their policies are good, other than whether it gets them into power, and a media class that fundamentally doesn't have a fucking clue about economics. Infuriating.
Green energy, but just not immediately.
Well, two things have changed since we announced this plan a couple of years ago. First of all, the economic situation that we're talking about. We've had 12 interest rate rises. We've had the experience of that Tory mini-budget last year, and that has underlined the need for financial stability.
But my point is you're still doing it. OK, you're not doing it in year one, but that was never going to happen, was it? You're still...
As Whiteley pointed out in chat, they weren't pledges, though. They were just positions, if still is to be believed.
Saying that you are going to end up spending $20
But the second thing is really important. It's also changed in the last 2 years, which is in every conversation that we've had with investors and businesses, we've discovered a real thirst for private sector investment in this too. And we've also had...
I'm going to have an aneurysm on stream in front of you right now with him saying, well, we've got really all this interest in private sector investment. What about public sector investment in publicly owned services, not slush funds for these nonsense public-private partnerships with no dividend for the public, just siphoning some more state money into the private sector yet again. And I go, well, actually, the really good thing about it is all of the interest in private investment. I'm going, please, for once, just use the power of the state for good.
Had the experience of the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, and that's been not just about what government does, but about crowding in the private sector investment. So I don't think the right lens to look at this through is just what government borrows and invests. An essential part of that, it's also about what you can do in partnership with the private sector. We've got a big long-term plan for this. It's also a responsible long-term plan, and it can lead the country through a change that is going to happen.
It's an awful lot of money, though, isn't it? 28 billion.
No, it's investment money. It doesn't matter, right? This is the big irony, right? Is that under a Keynesian theory of economic management under a state-owned backed currency, right, is that you can literally create a free lunch through deficit spending on a new infrastructure, on things that create economic growth, by creating jobs, by influencing supply, right? This is basic economics that was part of the way we did economics in this country for the entirety of the post-war period until the 1980s, right? Until the 1980s, that's what it was like. When you look at this, right? Look at gilt yields of what they were in the 1940s were around about 4%, right? They kind of were between 3 and 4% throughout the 40s, 50s, up until they were at 6% in the 60s. And at that time, we were still building houses. We were still engaging in deficit spending for growth. And the debt to GDP ratio still dropped. Even though gilt yields are rising right now after, how low they were for decades under the Conservatives when we should have been investing and didn't. We were doing austerity instead. The idea that it's now unaffordable to engage in deficit spending because of the rise in the yield on government bonds having increased to about where it was during the 60s is just nonsense politics, nonsense economics. It's just Labour spinning nonsense in a way to try and justify rowing back on any of the actual good pledges that they do, because they seem to be addicted to rowing back on any promises they might have made to the electorate up until this point, whether within the party or with the wider public. They seem to be absolutely addicted to just lying and going back and breaking promises. It's unreal to me.
Every year, and there's going to be all sorts of departments who are going to be looking at this saying, hang on a minute, I need to build more homes, I need to invest in schools and hospitals. 28 billion, you could knock $1 billion off that and say it was a rounding error. Is Ed Miliband, his policy, is he going to cost you another election?
Look, this is an ambitious...
And the line from the press is not, oh, you broke your promise. It's, well, actually, it's good that you cut out of all this spending, because spending is bad. Deficit spending is always bad regardless. I am understander of the economics understander. Sophie Ridge has indeed logged on to this discussion. No discussion around whether or not the lying is good or the rowing back on pledges is good. But just looks like the softest of soft left people in your cabinet, Ed Miliband, might lose you the election by wanting to actually make the country better in the most smallest way possible, right? It turns out the press made you excise all the genuine left-leaning elements of the party. How about the press tries to get you to excise even the people on the softest of soft lefts on the party? It's psychotic.
Policy, there are always trade-offs and choices in government. But the announcement that we made on Friday said one very important thing to the British public, which is that we will match our ambitions with responsibility. We will also match them by crowding in private sector investment. That's the best way to do this.
That's the worst phrase I've ever heard. I think that is literally the worst thing I've ever heard a Labour politician say, other than we're going to war with Iraq, obviously. We're all going to crowd in the private sector. That means nothing. That literally means nothing. It's a meaningless phrase. Which is, like, what they mean is we're going to not be an anti-private sector company, but government rather. We're going to be a government that is happy to deal with the interests of the private sector, regardless of the fact that we know that the private sector and the general public have competing material interests. Genuinely insane shit.
To lead the country through a big change so that when it comes to the election, we're matching realism with...
What big change? You just told us that you're not going to have any big changes. What the fuck are you talking about? Amusingly, this is not the only pledge that's getting rolled back. Yet another Labour U-turn. Just this morning on Laura Kearnsberg's show, David Lammy was asked about the honours process. Let's have a watch and see what he had to say about whether or not they would still commit to getting rid of the honours process and their Lord's reform that's already been on the cards. Let's have a look and see.
Priti Patel was found to be bullying in her department. I don't believe she should be rewarded, and I don't believe that if a government sets rules for everybody else during a pandemic, it's right that those who encourage parties in number 10 should be rewarded.
But I'm asking you about the principle here, though. You know, you've been clear, you don't approve of those specifics, but on principle, is it right that we have a system in this country where prime ministers can send their allies and friends to the House of Lords or give them gongs for whatever reason it appears they fancy?
The principle is founded on good faith, and we've had prime ministers that have abided by that good faith.
And again, this is just like literal, absolute historical revisionism nonsense, right? Literally, cash for honours happened under Tony Blair. Is your party that have been the biggest, highest profile scandal involving a lack of integrity with regards to Lords appointments and things like that. People being given honours within the honours lists through no genuine scrutiny and entirely because they were giving cash bungs to people, the establishment people at the top of power in the country, right? There has never been any good faith. And again, it's these delusional liberals, right? Obviously, Lammy is part of the group, the cadre of people who stands to benefit from this stuff. That's why he's doing it. That's why he's saying this kind of stuff, why he's lying about this. But the liberals who support him will all lap it up and just say, well, actually, it is good faith, or there's nothing wrong with the system. It's just a problem with Boris Johnson when the system was already broken. We have evidence of it all being broken on both sides of the aisle, with both political parties doing unscrupulous things with the honours system, and all of the systems and checks and balances that theoretically should exist don't exist. They've always been toothless and they've never worked. And if you think that they've been working, you've been living in a fucking alternative reality. You've been living in dreamland, thinking that somehow Boris Johnson and what's happened right now is just some kind of weird aberration rather than the natural conclusion to a completely failed system where essentially the entirety of the country is run for corporate interests.
Problem is at the moment is we have a lot of bad faith, and that's why you put the questions to Grant Shapps that you did.
So would Labour
and on
preserve then the honours system as it stands?
Of course we would preserve the honours system, because in Keir Starmer you have a man of incredible integrity, and I say that.
The man with so much integrity, he's now rolling back on his Lord's reform pledges, by you just literally saying, now we're going to keep the honour system. Well, the man who lies to his entire party to get elected as the leader of the party, to then reverse away from all of the pledges that he stood on when trying to get himself elected, who's flip-flopping all of the different policies that he said that he would do now that he's in power, has thrown the transgender community under the bus by supporting the government in what they're doing to attack our rights. For example, the way that he's turned his back on the unions by getting rid of people from the front bench who even stand in solidarity on the picket line with striking workers, the people who he is there to represent in Parliament as the party that is there as the trade union wing in government, right, in the Commons. The person who then just has no scruples whatsoever and will factionally purge people who disagree with him from the party, which is another lie and another U-turn on the position that he said that there should be open selections, when there now are the opposite of that, where we're having NEC-imposed candidates being put on people, even with when we have a year and a half before the next general election. No snap election stuff going on here for them to justify it, right? How is, in what universe at all, is Keir Starmer a man of integrity, public defender of Silvio Berlusconi? You know, deporter of people who fucking steal very small items during the riots, like literally deporting these people. Come off it, Lammy. Pull the other one, mate. It's got bells on. But of course, this is the guy who gets paid 200k a year by LBC, so.
Having known him for many, many years, let us get back to good faith politics, where yes, we can work together, there can be consensus, but we're addressing the big issues of our time.
But I thought you wanted to get rid of the House of Lords. Certainly have a good old think about whether the system works. You just said you want to preserve the honour system.
Well,
we've
said that we want to preserve the honour system because we do believe that in this country, and I'm thinking of ordinary people in communities like mine that are rewarded for the work that they're doing.
They'd reward them with literally anything else, right? You can get rid of the honour system and just have a reward system for members of the public, right? But we've literally seen for the entirety of the time up to this point that the honour system has basically only ever been used when appointments have been done by politicians specifically. They've been done for factional gain, they've been done for political gain, and they've been done for financial gain, right? And the idea, even if, as someone's rightly pointing out in chat, even if Keir Starmer was a man of integrity, which of course he is not, then what is to say that that wouldn't be the case of someone else down the line? Because again, we've just seen what's been proven for the last 20 years is there is no checks or balances, there is no precedent, there is no good faith at all. Even if you are doggedly trying to be good faith within this system, you will fail because it's not set up to reward people acting in good faith. The only way to be able to fix this is to make these systems force people to act in good faith. And in case of the honour system, it will never be like that. You have to completely jettison it or make it completely independent of political parties.
For example, for young people. But yes, it is our intention in the first term to address the issues of the democratic deficit in the House of Lords.
So scrapping House of Lords in the first term, I note there you've said that quite specifically. You say there Keir Starmer is a man of integrity who stands by his word. This week, though, actually, Labour has rather changed its word on what was meant to be one of your big flagship policies. Now, Rachel Reeves here in this studio has talked about the big green prosperity plan, spending £28 billion on that, moving to green energy, cleaning up factories, spending £28 billion each year. Except this week, she kind of shifted it forward a bit. She's changed her mind. Now, don't you want people to trust you and know that when you say something as a party, you're going to stick to it?
Look, the British economy can only succeed if we win the race for clean energy. That means reforming and moving to renewables on solar, on wind, on nuclear, and of course it means the jobs of the future. The Japanese are spending 16 billion annually. The Germans are spending 19 billion annually. We are not currently in the race, but we're absolutely clear we've got to stick to our fiscal rules. Rachel Reeves set out those fiscal rules.
The stupid thing is, Pat McFadden didn't actually mention the fiscal rules when we were watching that bit earlier, so it's worth continuing and re-going over this stuff for this segment here. You just go over the fact that the fiscal rules are self-imposed, they're ideological, they're not like, obviously everything is ideological, of course, this politics is how politics works, but she's not doing this because anything that would break the fiscal rules would be an economic detriment to the country. The fiscal rules are there to please capital, right? It's to please the media. It's, quite frankly, to force there to be a reason why they would have to row back on progressive policy platform pledges, because they can always go, well, can't be progressive, fiscal rules, self-imposed rules, nothing we can do. Yeah, you can just ignore the fucking rules that you literally made up. And one of the rules is getting down the debt, which is nonsense, right? Debt to GDP ratio, fine. But getting down the debt is going to involve deficit spending, right? If you want to grow the economy and grow out of the debt and lower the debt to GDP ratio, you have to grow first. And that's what the whole deficit spending thing is about. From the entirety of the time in the post-war period, when we were in massive amounts of debt after the war, where we had massive amounts of our debt to GDP ratio is basically what it is now. And gilt yields were similar to what they are now, amusingly as well too. Is that during that time period, we continued to deficit spend, right? And the debt to GDP ratio continued to drop. The spending has to come first. That's how Keynesian fiscal economics works. That's literally how this shit works. And to say that, well, we need to grow the economy first before, which is one of the fiscal rules, is to grow the economy first to bring the debt down, without spending money to get the growth in the first place, means you're just going to get stuck into austerity economics forever. That is what these self-imposed fiscal rules can only lead to one place, and the one place that it will lead is austerity, especially as you won't reverse Brexit and at least get some of the additional trade that would come in to try and, boost economic growth through some other fashion, right? They have, by their own admission, locked themselves into an austerity platform because of these self-imposed fiscal rules that are completely meaningless, completely nonsensical, and completely pointless. Oh God, it's so silly. It's so stupid. And all to just placate some fucking idiots in the city and some idiots in Fleet Street.
That we want to see a reduction in deficit on the day-to-day spending, that we want to see a reduction in our debt, and of course we will only borrow to spend where we're investing in our economy. So we're sticking to those fiscal rules, and for that reason we will delay that 28 billion spend until the second half of the next Parliament, if we win the next general election.
But what happens then if in 2026, 2027, the economy is actually still in dire straits, and you still want to stick to those fiscal rules that she's set out to keep things in balance, does the green spending then just get delayed again?
Look, you're absolutely...
Yes, it will do, right? Given what the assumptions, what's been said here, that the fiscal rules come before the spending, if they are not going to spend to get the economic growth to bring the debt down, then they will be locked into not deficit spending further, because that will increase the debt to then get the economic growth and then reduce the debt to GDP ratio. Like, I'm sorry, like that's literally what they are locking themselves into right now. It's nonsense.
Absolutely right. We've had 12 interest rates rises since we announced our Green Prosperity Plan 18 months ago. Inflation is now running at 8.7%. The government crashed the economy and mortgages have gone up. I hope they don't do that again, but if they do that again, we will revise our plans. We're sticking to our fiscal rules.
Okay, David Lammy, thank you very much.
Not just yet, just literally an entire party of people who don't understand economics at all. I mean, Keir Starmer doesn't. We know, I've said many times on the stream, he basically had to be given a crash course in economics by the right-wing Morgan McSweeney handlers that essentially got him into the position that he was in the first place, so that he could essentially turn the Labour Party into another neoliberal party, to revamp it back into the Blair ways of old. And these people don't understand the basics of Keynesianism that was necessary to be able to get the growth that they say that they need to be able to justify the spending in the first place. It's a vicious cycle that will only lead us into further managed decline. And that's what I've said. You know, I've done plenty of segments about the theoretical managed decline that we'll see under the future Labour government, and the ramifications of that will be disastrous for the left more broadly. Right? We'll have the same thing that happened with Blair, where a Blair government that didn't prioritise class interests then became an establishment party, but then lost the vote of the working class because they thought that the left wing was now the establishment, rather than the Blair party became right wing. That made them part of the establishment. And the Starmer government will do the same. They will not have the national renewal that we so desperately need, that was being promised by the previous Labour administration. And that's going to push people away from the Labour movement further and further into the hands of the right-wing populists that were there to suck up the lack of class politics during the Blair era. It will happen, mark my words. And shit like this is going to be why, because they're not going to actually improve people's living conditions in the way that they say that they need to. And we all know what happens when people's living conditions deteriorate under capitalism. There's only one place that goes, right? Or two places. And it's socialism or barbarism. And clearly the socialism door is shut. So look forward to that, future viewers. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.